Senator Mason.
Mr Acting Deputy President, on New Year's Day 2000, Queenslanders enjoyed celebrating the start of a new century. Our newspapers were reflecting upon nearly 100 years of great national achievement. But 100 years ago, on New Year's Day 1900, it was the Queensland Mounted Infantry fighting far away in South Africa that first showed the world the spirit of Australia. As fathers of the Anzacs, these soldiers gave birth to Aussie courage. Mr Acting Deputy President, recently I had the great honour of presenting 2 plaques to the 2nd 14th Queensland Mounted Infantry to be taken by them to South Africa and placed at Kimberley and Elands River, 2 places where Australian troops fought the first engagements of our proud military history. The Boer War from 1899 to 1902 saw more than 16,000 Australians answer the call of empire to fight in South Africa. It was Australia's first national military deployment, with all the colonies for the first time sending a large contingent of troops. And it was also the first time our troops fought in the uniform of the Commonwealth of Australia. Australia had not yet achieved federation by the start of the Boer War. The first soldiers went as Victorians, New South Welshmen and Queenslanders, but returned in 1902 as Australians. Indeed, in the first decades of this century, it was the awful spectacle of war that was to forge our national identity. And I make special mention that Queensland, the state that I'm proud to represent, was the first of the Australian colonies to offer troops to Britain. And I also note, sadly, that it was Queenslanders that were the first Australians to lay down their lives in the Boer War. And it was a war that was to cost the lives of a further 600 of our countrymen and remains to this very day our 3rd bloodiest conflict. Our troops returned home to a new nation, carrying a reputation as excellent soldiers and fixing in the national consciousness the sense of pride, spirit of adventure and loyalty which in World War I would help establish the Anzac legend. 6 of those soldiers, Mr Acting Deputy President, became the first Australians to receive the British Empire's highest decoration, the Victoria Cross. And it was fitting that in the Australian spirit of mateship, all 6 VCs were awarded for rescuing wounded soldiers under fire. I was deeply honoured a few weeks ago to stand with our soldiers, past and present. We gathered in Brisbane at Anzac Square to commemorate an early sacrifice in the early days and the early months of our country's history. A sacrifice of men and of women who responded to a call of arms, eager to pursue what was properly then seen as Australia's national interest. Their deeds stand proud alongside the deeds of others who also fought for Australia and in Australia's interests in so many conflicts, particularly in World War I, World War II and in Vietnam. Australia's bush tradition gave us the famous light horse. Its contribution in the Boer War and World War I is legendary. The light horse holds a very special place in the proud legacy of the Australian Armed Forces. Born on the South African veldt, but even now writing a new chapter in the jungles of East Timor. Forward, the Queensland Mounted Infantry's call to arms has been hard-earned. With every sacrifice, every drop of blood, every inch of spirit and every ounce of determination. It's the spirit that reverberates in the reply of an Australian officer when our troops were surrounded and the Boers demanded our surrender. He said, "We're Australians, we never surrender, Australia forever." The 2nd 14th Queensland Mounted Infantry has now returned to South Africa, but this time in the name of peace. The plaques that I presented to the men and women of the 2nd 14th honoured what is best in Australian soldiers: a great fighting spirit, discipline and sacrifice, tempered with a love of freedom and fairness. Taking their place at Kimberley and Elands River, these plaques now honour the memories of those men and women who served, who fought and who died in the Boer War, South Africa, 1899 to 1902. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Commanding Officer, Colonel Chris Burns and Colonel Miles Farmer, for bestowing upon me the honour of presenting these plaques on behalf of the Australian Government. And as well, I'd like to thank Mr Lance Lawler, the Organising Secretary of the Royal Australian Armoured Corps Association, Queensland Branch, for inviting me to participate in this presentation. Mr Acting Deputy President, when the men and women of the 2nd 14th Mounted Infantry went to Kimberley and went to Elands River, even though they had travelled 10,000 miles to get there, they never really were in a foreign country. Because every piece of ground, no matter how small or distant from these shores, upon which an Australian soldier has shed his blood, becomes part of Australia.